I'm Jackie Doucette, and I'm on a mission to discover exactly what life is like beyond retirement. Join me while I chat with people who've already done it, who've retired to something rather than from something. Let's find out together exactly what's waiting for us when we say goodbye to that 9 to 5. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Beyond Retirement. Today, I'm really excited to have Laurence Kotlikoff with me. He's a professor of economics at Boston University, and he's the author of Money Magic, An Economist's Secrets to More Money, Less Risk, and a Better Life. It's just come on the bookshelves in January, so we're going to be able to get it right away. Thanks very much for joining me today, Laurence.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a great pleasure.
So in addition to Money Magic that has just come out, you've written a lot of other books. According to your website, 19 of them and hundreds of articles, and you've been named one of the world's 25 most influential economists. So can you tell us a little bit about what led you into focusing on economics?
Well, I originally thought I would become a doctor. I wanted to do something useful to help people. And as I relate in the book, I came in close contact with a frog that I had to kill and resuscitate and kill and resuscitate many times in biology class in freshman year. And by the end of that class, I was an economics major. So I didn't really know anything about economics, but I took a course with a terrific professor. His name is Bob Pollack. He's still teaching at the University of Washington in St. Louis. Fantastic teacher. And then I had some other very good professors at the University of Pennsylvania where I went. And it just got me hooked. And I could see that there was a practical value to economics in solving problems. The book I wrote that you're referencing, Money Magic, is about people's personal financial problems. And they're also their lifestyle decisions that I know your podcast is focused on, how to make those kinds of decisions. And economics has a lot to offer in this area. So I got interested through my career in personal finance, but I also work on all kinds of other issues like carbon taxation, banking reform, taxation in general, pension policy, Social Security in our country's case, healthcare policy. So if you keep working at it and you don't, enjoy what you're doing and you're kind of get interested in all the different major issues going on in economics, be it inflation or recession, what caused the Great Recession, for example, I've written about that. Then you just naturally you're intrigued and you gotta keep working and it's fun. It's kind of like, being an academic, it's not clear it's work. If you love, I love what I'm doing, and I'm constantly interested in what's going on and trying to explain things. Like right now we have this inflation going on 6%. It's cutting into people's real incomes if they're on fixed pensions, and if they've got, let's say, long-term bonds, they just lost 6% of the value because we were running a 6% inflation. Is this going to continue? What's really causing it? What's driving it? Is it the bottlenecks, the supply shortages, or is it something more about the government's printing what appears to be printing a ton of money over the last 12 years or so?
So how does someone who is just kind of, Joe Blow sitting at their table, not a professor of economics, not having studied it at all, how can they use economics to help them in their day-to-day life?
Well, okay, so let me just mention my website, which is kotlikoff.net. So I post every column that I write a lot of columns to the public, and I write a lot of articles. So whenever I write an article about something, maybe it's about carbon taxation, then I usually write a few op-eds so I can convey to the public what the message is about that topic. And then I'm writing these books to the public. How can you So if you're thinking about personal finance and your decisions about your lifestyle and how to think about how to use economics to decide, for example, whether or not to sell your home, whether to downsize your home, to sell and rent, for example, or downsize your home, sell and buy another home, yep, or sell and move to another part of the country. In our country, we can, in the US, you can, leave California where you might be paying up to a 13% income tax, move to Texas where there's no state income tax. Now, there's also property taxes that are higher and maybe sales taxes are higher. So you have to think about those considerations as well. But these are the kind of choices. Do I give up my neighbors and my friends from California in the valley that I'm living in LA and go and live in Texas where I don't know anybody and I'm 70 but gee, I have this extra spending money. Gee, I could fly my friends to come visit me. I don't see them every day anyway. Or I can go fly and stay in an Airbnb for a month a year. So that's, or, if I'm in a, let's say, I give you one other quick example on the housing side that I discussed in the book, Money Magic. We have, my wife and I have friends who they're not retired, but they could be retired in the sense that this could be a retired couple doing this. So they have a nice apartment in Boston. And what they did is they Airbnb'd it, they rented it out, and they took that money and they hopped on an airplane and they went to Tahiti. And then they went from Tahiti, they went to New Zealand. And then from New Zealand, they went to Australia. And then they went to Europe. And they ended up, after 6 months, they ended up in Crete. And it was all paid for by the rental on their apartment in Boston. So basically, they had a trip around the world financed by, and they were happier. So if you're retired and you want to travel and you want to figure out how can I afford to do this? One way is to use your house as an asset. And these days with Airbnb, a lot of people can do that, which was not formerly the case. So, or you can, if you have a place that's not Airbnb-able, maybe it's a condo that doesn't allow that, you could sell your condo, buy a house in a nice place that you don't want to be in all year long, and Airbnb it. Live half the year, and then travel half the year, all off your house.
So that's definitely a way that they can see the world, do other things, and hold on to their property. How would you recommend that someone decides if that's a good choice or not?
Well, I mean, if it's not costing, in this case of our friends, it really wasn't costing them anything on balance. The money they were getting from the Airbnb rental, because Boston rents are so high, the hotel rents, so the Airbnb rents are so high, that they had enough money that they could just live off that rent and live in lower cost housing around the world and come back. And they really didn't end up any poorer. This was like a free vacation, is the idea.
And
that's pretty cool, right?
Exactly. I don't know too many people who wouldn't want a free vacation.
Yeah. So this was I have a cousin who lives in LA. In LA, real estate's very expensive, and so rental. So she has a house that she really wasn't able to afford living in because the property taxes are so high. So, and she had a garage, just a regular garage. So what she decided to do was to Airbnb her house and to use the proceeds from the Airbnb rentals to renovate her garage and turn it into a studio apartment. And so most of the year she rents her house out, and this is giving her retirement income. And she gets to be where she wants to be in LA and same neighborhood. She has relatives nearby, other relatives. And then some part of the year she gets to be in her own house. So this is a way of, dealing with the trapped equity that a lot of people have in their homes. It's kind of a way of like downsizing without actually selling your house. But of course, a lot of people have homes that are, 4 bedrooms and the kids have moved out, and they could move around the corner to a two bedroom. And the reason I got into that, that's one of the chapters in the book. It's called Get House Rich. I got into this because during COVID, which is obviously still going on, so we can't just say it's over, but toward the beginning of COVID, my wife and I were living in our 960 square foot condo in Boston, and we decided it was driving us a little bit crazy being in that. It's a large space for a lot of people around the world. For most people around the world, 960 square feet is a luxury. But we thought, gee, maybe we could sell our condo and find some place that had more space and also had a yard. So my wife started looking around, and she came up with Providence, Rhode Island, and the house that I'm speaking to you from. She found online by searching. It's 301 years old. It was built in 1720. I think Louis XIV was still the king of France. I'm not positive, but I think he was still the king of France. It's that old. It's one of the oldest houses in the country, in North America. And we just lucked into this place. But the interesting thing is, as an economist, I hated the idea of moving to Providence from Boston because I just love Boston. And once I got here and fell in love with the house and saw all I could really enjoy, Providence had lots to offer, and there's beaches and Rhode Island, all this that I know about. I realized how ignorant I had been about choices, about not looking around, not pricing the options. But the really interesting thing was that the price per square foot of this house was 1/3 what our condo sold for in Boston. So we were able to get a bigger house with, at a lower total outlay than we sold our place for in Boston. And that's, that's a way of, so I'm not retired, but if I had, whether this is kind of independent of being retired, I know your program's focused on how do you make a better life in retirement, and given your resources. Obviously, you could go back to work, and I am still working, but this decision was really not impacted by whether or not I was working.
No, exactly. So that's one of the things that you talked about was, making the decision of whether you want to keep your house and, rent it out at Airbnb or just sell it and move somewhere else. How do people, maybe you don't know, how do people make those decisions? What kind of criteria do they have to look at in deciding about their lifestyle choices?
This is the bigger economics point, which is that we want to price out our decisions. We have a certain amount of resources, and we need to know the price of every lifestyle choice, starting with retirement itself, because we're buying leisure. If we're giving up, for saying we're going to stop working at 63, well, that's a decision to take the longest vacation of our lives. And we may end up being retired longer than we actually worked.
Yeah.
Could happen. A lot of people are living into their late 90s. So in the book, I discussed the power of economics to price decisions, lifestyle decisions, like that decision about going around the world by, using your rental of your Airbnb. Suppose it wasn't a break-even option for them. Suppose it would have cost them, $20,000. Could they afford it? Well, they have to think about the next best use of that money, or a better use of that 20,000, and then really understand whether this entire venture made sense. So if it's buying a new car, for example, maybe you want to buy an electric car because you're, conscious about climate change, and you feel like you want to get on board with that. Is it really a better idea than keeping your 20-year-old car that's you just had fixed and looks like it could go on for another 10 years? And what would you otherwise be doing with the money that you're going to have tied up in that car, a new car? Mostly it's going to be sitting in your garage or whatever. What could you be doing with that? Could you be going on a vacation? Could you be buying theater tickets, annual, yearly theater tickets, or tickets to the museum or the opera? Or could you be taking more trips to visit your grandchildren, or helping your kids out with the money that you'd otherwise be spending on the car? What's more important, helping the grandkids go to camp, for example, versus it doesn't sound like a lifestyle decision, but it is a lifestyle decision. It's a decision to feel good, even not doing anything different in terms of your daily life. You're feeling better because you've helped your kids do something, you've helped your grandkids who are very precious to you. So I talk in the book, and I mentioned this to you, before we started, about the analogy of going shopping in a grocery store where you have, let's say, $100 to spend, and you start putting things into your cart, but there's no prices listed on the commodities that you're putting into the cart. And as soon as the cart fills up with $100 worth of product, automatically your credit card is charged. So think about that experience. You'd be very unhappy. You'd walk out of that store with $100 worth of products, but not $100 worth of happiness. So that would be like buying things blind. And in retirement, or even before retirement, when we make our lifestyle decisions, we have to price them out. We have to know what things cost. And that sometimes can be difficult. We have to kind of sit down with a piece of paper or software. I've worked on the side. I'm a professor, as you know, of economics at Boston University, but on the side, I set up a software company to put together economics-based financial planning. So the software, it's called Maxify, Maxifi.com, allows you to say, well, here's a base living standard plan. Now, if I do this, like I retire early, how much will that lower my sustainable spending in today's dollars? After all the taxes and all the off-the-top expenditures, how much will my living standard, my fund money, go down on a sustainable basis if I retire early, or if I buy this car, or if I buy this boat, or if I take this trip around the world that's not paid for by Airbnb, if I don't have any other source of income? But you can also say, well, what if I do these two things? I take the trip around the world, but I also Airbnb my apartment. I don't just leave it locked up, but I actually rent it. And so I've got rental income coming in. I've got expenditures going out on the trip. And then I see, well, it's not impacting my sustainable living standard to do this. So so we actually have software now. And the book is trying to show people, even if they don't want to use that software or some other type of software, that they might use their own Excel spreadsheet, that conceptually how to make these calculations, how to use arithmetic even to figure this stuff out, to figure out what something really costs. And it's not just this year's cost, but you have to think about, if I buy a Lexus a Tesla, because we're talking about an electric car, for $80,000, and maybe I lease it, well, this is going to cost me spending money for the rest of my life.
Yep.
I'm going to smooth it out. This is what economics says. We're not going to just reduce our spending by $80,000 this year and then live at the same level thereafter. We're going to take the hit through time. And how big is that hit? Well, maybe $80,000 over 40 years, 2,000 a year roughly. It's not so terrible, right? Maybe I'll save on gas. I will. And so maybe it's not 2,000, maybe it's only 1,500. And maybe that $1,500 is worth it in terms of my feelings about the environment, the climate change, by doing my part. This may be the last car I ever have to buy because, or I find out by doing my research that these things are very expensive to repair, and that the battery's only going to last 5 years. I'm going to have to put that in. So it's not just $1,500 a year, but it's more. So, you quickly kind of narrow down, what is this really going to mean in terms of what I get to spend on other stuff? That's the cost of that Tesla versus, and then I got to say, well, of course if I don't do this, then I got the cost of the other, like I can't remember, forget about needing to repair the current car I've got. But so you factor all this stuff in, and then you end up with the net cost of the Tesla, and you see whether it's really worth it. So what I'm trying to get is if we can make these decisions in a very systematic way without any advanced high-powered mathematics. It's really just arithmetic. And it's arithmetic particularly these days because the interest rates are so low. So $1 in the future right now, when you say, what is that dollar worth? It's kind of worth $1 adjusted for inflation, at least in the US, because the long-term interest rates what we call inflation-adjusted interest rates, real interest rates, are close to zero because interest rates are so low. So it's really a matter of just not being, the ability to treat $1 in the future adjusted for inflation like $1 today makes these calculations actually quite easy.
So what you're saying is, you start out, it's just kind of a pros and cons list of what you want to do,
Yeah.
How it's going to affect you, what the outcome might be, and then you can put some kind of monetary value on it based on the cost of what it is that you're doing.
Yeah. There's an expression that people say that economists know the price of everything but the value of nothing. But I think people in general know the value of a lot of things, but the price of nothing.
Yeah.
We kind of have the feeling we know what the value of spending a month in Greece on some beautiful island would be. We know how happy that would make, or this, or having a massage every week, how good that would feel. But we don't really know what the price is unless we really think about it in terms of what does it mean we're going to give up? Does this mean we have to go to fewer restaurants? We get to go to a restaurant twice a month rather than 3 times a month.
Right.
But we can figure this out that's what the book is really trying to guide people to understand what things cost, but it's also trying to shake up people's thinking about personal finance in general, and in a sense that the economics approach to personal finance, what we advise people do with their finances, whether it's investment decisions, saving decisions, insurance decisions, retirement decisions, annuitization, Social Security decisions, which is in our country, we can decide when to take Social Security, and it makes a big difference as to how much that initial benefit is that continues till you die. You have to wait to get it to be higher, but it's much higher if you wait. It's like 76% higher than if you take it at 62, if you wait till 70, your retirement benefit. So how do you think about this? And we economists think about it entirely differently from the way the financial industry, the way Wall Street is thinking about it and talking to the public about it. And what I'm trying to convey in the book is that the difference is that we have first of all, a theoretical framework for coming up with where we're coming from that's grounded in 100 years of research, going back to work by a famous economist named Irving Fisher at Yale in the 1920s and 30s. He was the most famous economist in the world at the time. He did very fundamental work on saving and spending and what we call life cycle consumption smoothing versus the industry, which is trying to sell product and give advice at the same time. And the problem is they're conflicted. So if you're a financial planner or if your broker is telling you to do X, Y, and Z, and they're also charging you for selling you insurance products or selling or managing your money, they're conflicted. And so their advice is not independent of what they're just trying to sell you. And that's not the case with the economics. It's certainly not the case with me. In my company, we have a software that provides advice but doesn't sell any products. We don't get any, we wouldn't take any advertising. People have asked advertise on our website, their products, no way. That's a clear violation of fiduciary responsibility. If you're giving somebody suggestions, we literally can't say that we're giving financial advice because we're not, we don't have any, you can't say that legally in the US and start to become a fiduciary in certain ways that we're not. So we're just giving suggestions from economics.
I was going to say, you're showing people what they can do and what the results of that are going to be. You're not saying, hey, go do this.
Yeah, we're just showing the trade-off. And also with like investing, that's a lifestyle decision. It's also, and you may not think about that as a lifestyle decision, but it's a decision whether or not to sleep well at night. Because if you put all your money in the stock market, let's say you retire at 65 and you say, well, I got $3 million and I've got a pension of $30,000 a year. And well, if you're happy to live on $30,000 a year, and if the 3 million you put all the 3 million in the stock market, and the stock market drops in half, and you at that point pull out because you said you've had it. And I'm not saying that the stock market, you may pull out because it's time to pull out. You've lost enough money. And there's no guarantee, as I say in the book, as the economic teaches us, that the stock market will go back up. But financial planners will tell you, certainly the person who's running your money, who's charging you for running your money, for having lost 50% of your money with his advice or her advice, that the stock market's going to go back. It's going to come back. Just be patient, be brave, stick it out. But the stock market actually evolves as a random walk. It doesn't evolve in any way, shape, or form that says that if it drops today, that there's anything that's going to bring it back for sure, because it's only going to come back up if there's new information that nobody knew about today that would drive it up. But the new information that comes in that isn't known today, if it was known today, would be affecting the price today. So all the current price embeds all the information that's out there right now. So anything that's going to move the price tomorrow is going to be new information. And new information by definition can be good or bad. So if the market has dropped, it can drop again tomorrow. And it can keep dropping. And that's what's known as a random walk. It will randomly go up, and where it will be in the future has no connection to where it is today.
Right.
And so you can't count on it coming back. So if you invest really aggressively in retirement, you're talking about a lot of sleepless nights. You're talking about your living standard potentially taking a path down the hill. Now, it is true that if you invest more aggressively in higher yield securities, riskier securities are likely to do better. They're riskier, but they have some advantage, which is that on average, they're going to do better, but there's bigger upside and downside. So if you invest in those things, there's a higher chance that you're going to do well through time than if you invest safely. But there's also, if you invest that way, there's a smaller chance you're going to do poorly. But when you do poorly, you do very poorly. That's generally not conveyed by the financial industry. They say, oh, your chance of doing well, your chance of succeeding, of being able to spend up here in retirement at your targeted level is higher if you invest this way with me. But they're not talking about the magnitude of the downside. And that's what economics-based planning does. It shows you our software, for example, shows you trajectories of where your living standard would go up and down. Now, I know you're talking primarily to Canadians, right? I've got that, or
well,
not.
I'm in Canada. I don't know where the listeners are.
Listeners are, yeah. Well, so our software has U.S. taxes and Social Security in it. Yep. But for Canadians could run our software, they just have to, under settings and assumption, turn off our tax system and Social Security system and basically try and put in try and proxy put in their Canadian pension and put in their net income rather than gross income. There's a way to use the program pretty well, even if you're not an American U.S. citizen. You guys are Americans, we're Americans. I really meant a U.S. citizen. But that's what you want to see. You want to see the ups and downs to your living standard so you can make this decision about, am I going to take a risky investment and also spending strategy? Am I going to spend aggressively through time thinking, gee, I'm going to really make a killing on the market. My broker told me this. I'm paying him all this money. He's got to do well. It must be great because he's charging me so much. And then it may not pay off. That's a decision, a lifestyle decision too. And it's a high risk. It's kind of a decision to live at the edge. Yeah, I mean, where you want to live, how you want to spend your money in retirement, how you want to, you certainly want to try and optimize your spending power. And I mean, think about this issue. You've got a mortgage and you might have a retirement account. Your retirement accounts are called the Registered Retirement System, right?
RRSP.
RSP, right. So it's not really much different from the US.
No.
Well, if you're retired and you can take the money out on a safe basis, I mean, with a penalty-free basis because you're old enough, that's if you're over 59, that's the case in the US. You can take your money out of, let's say, a traditional IRA, take the money out and pay off your mortgage. You might say, gee, that's crazy. I have the money in the stock market. Why should I pay off the mortgage? Maybe the mortgage is charging you 3.5%. That's your mortgage rate. And you can earn in the US today around 2% in treasury bonds, long-term treasury bonds. So a lot of people have mortgages for 3.5%. There's a 1.5% differential there. So I can safely take my money. In the US, we have these Roth accounts where you can take money out without paying any taxes because you already paid taxes on the money that's put in. So if you had the money in the Roth, you could just take the money out, just pay off your mortgage. You'd make a 1.5% differential. That's a safe arbitrage. Right. That's a way to get a higher living standard. And this can add up to a lot. If you've got a big mortgage, it can mean a lot of money. And I'm talking about, $50,000, $100,000, that range, depending on the size of the mortgage. Because these small differentials in interest rates can matter. Now, but you might say, but I'm going to give up earning 6.5% on the stock market. Why should I take my money out of my region, or let alone pay taxes from taking money out of my RSP, right? uh, or my traditional IRA and pay taxes and then use what's left to pay off the mortgage, well, that could still pay for itself, by the way, because we've run that in our software, even if you have to pay taxes on the withdrawal. But why should I do that if I can earn so much more in the stock market? You can't earn that money in the stock market without risk. And the fact that you can only earn such a low return safely means that that's the risk adjustment. So once you risk adjust, that's what the market is saying. Like at the margin, you can buy stock, you can buy these bonds. The differential is telling you the risk adjustment. These bonds are safe apart from inflation. And then, then we also, let me just say one other thing. I don't want to, I'm a professor, so I could talk forever, right? So, but with inflation taking off in the US, I'm not sure whether it's really happening in Canada to the same extent. I mean, it probably is. Not as much.
I don't think it's too bad, right? Well, inflation. I guess the price of houses has certainly gone up.
Yeah, but in our we're running like a 6% inflation across the board in different. So if you paid off your mortgage, so I don't want to kind of suggest everybody they go run off and pay off their mortgage, because if you have a mortgage, it's a nominal payment, and if inflation takes off, what do you have to pay back in real terms, in terms of, let's say, how many hot dogs those repayments, that monthly payment cost, that goes down. You're paying back in watered down dollars. So that's like a natural hedge against inflation. Let's say you had a pension that was, or a government or a bond that was paying a fixed nominal coupon, and inflation is 6%, the purchasing power of that payment stream goes down 6% this year.
Right.
Went down for people. So how many hot dogs they could buy goes down 6%. But also, if their mortgage payments in real terms go down by 6%. So it's a hedge. So if people are exposed to inflation risk, depending on how their income is coming in or how they're invested, then they may not want to pay off their mortgage, even though they can make this interest differential. So all these things are being discussed in the book. I'm just trying to give you a little flavor for it, but part of a lifestyle decision is how much risk you want to take. Well, let me tell you about a cool idea that I talk about in the book. It's called upside investing, which is to try and, people want to have some money in the market because they know on average it's a good return. It's not like going to the casino where on average you're going to lose money. So how can you put your money in the stock market, put some money in the stock market without risking your core living standard? Well, actually, there's a way to do it. It's called upside investing. And it's like going to Las Vegas and taking $100 to the casino and leaving your wallet at home in the hotel room. Leaving your wallet in the hotel room is securing your living standard, because you know you're not going to be using your credit cards that are in the wallet to go buy chips 2 hours from now, right? Yeah. And basically risk losing everything because you buy $500,000 worth of chips on credit card, some big number. Yeah. Obviously, maybe you can't do that, but maybe you could buy $5,000 worth of chips and lose it all that evening. So how can you do this? Invest in the stock market without risking your living standard. So here's how you can do it. You can think about putting money. You've got some money in the stock market now. You can think about how much you're going to add to the stock market through time. And then you can think about, at what point will I start gradually moving that money from the stock market into safe investments? So in our country, we can buy inflation index bonds, which are safe investments. They're yielding negative returns right now, but they're still safe. You know for sure how much you're going to lose, okay? Again, I mean, it's not fun, but it's safe. You're not going to lose more than that or less. So now, suppose you then say, I'm going to take all the other money that I don't have in the stock market that I'm not spending this year. I'm going to invest safely in these inflation index bonds. So, and then I'm going to spend as if all the money in the stock market that's there now and everything that I plan to add is gone, is lost 100%. Now I'm going to set a floor to my So under that assumption, I'm going to spend based on that assumption that everything's in the market, that I'm going to add to the market, all gone. I'm going to figure out how much spending I can do given that. That's my living standard floor. And then when I start taking money out of the market, if there is anything to take out, as I take it out, I get to permanently raise that level of my living standard, my floor. So it's all upside. It's just like I don't spend anything from going to the casino until I leave the casino. And now I can permanently raise my spending. And whatever winnings, if I walk out of the door with, $5,000 from the casino and divided by the number of years I have left, that's how much more I can spend every year from that evening at the casino. That's if you like casino investing or upside investing. I have a colleague, Zvi Bodhi at BU. He calls it safety first investing. So our software is implementing this, but not everybody likes to use software. So I wrote the book because most people don't want to run software, but they don't really need to get the gist of 90% of what I'm trying to, the software can convey, or maybe 80% in certain cases, but a lot.
So what I take from all of that is that, basically what people need to do is figure out what they're happy with as a baseline, and anything that's going to go up or go down from there, they've got to decide whether it's worth that change in the baseline. If they invest something and they make money, then they can averaging it out, increase their baseline, or they can spend it all at once if they want to, but they've got to think about what's happening.
If they take it out, let's say it goes up and they spend, my market, I just got a 10% return this year, I'm going to spend more. That's not upside investing because now you haven't taken the money out and invested it safely. What you're doing is presuming that money, when you do take it out, will be that 10% gain will be yours to take out, but it could drop 20% next year, right? And you spent more this year. So now next year,
you're even lower.
Kind of a situation where you have to drop your spending. So the idea is to have a floor where you never have to have your living standard ever decline and only go up. So if the market does great guns, unless you take the money out and invest it safely, you don't spend any more, according to this rule. That's upside investing.
Okay. And all through this, I keep going back in my mind to the going through the grocery store with the grocery cart, thinking about all the things I'm buying with no prices, and to me that's a really, really clear way of looking at the things I do in my life and what they cost me, because I don't know until later for most of the things. So you've got to really look at what you're doing, and you've got to really think about how that might affect your life, down the road, at the cash register.
Right. I mean, I think that's the whole essence of your podcast, if I have it right, that beyond retirement, you're trying to understand how can I take this time I've got and the resources I have and best allocate them to get the most happiness.
Yeah, put it to the best use.
So I've got the combination of my time as a resource and then money as a resource. And how can I use these two resources to maximize what economists call utility? And we have mathematical expressions. So we've been kind of focused on what we call utility maximization. And when there's uncertainty, like when there's uncertainty about what kind of return I'm going to get from investing, how big inflation will be, my future health bills, then we are focused on something called expected utility. How much do I have to think about my average happiness, because it's not for sure.
Right.
And our mathematical expressions for happiness take into account that the downside is much worse than the upside. So the average happiness is putting greater, it's not like a simple average, it's putting much stronger weight on downside outcomes. So that leads us to be risk averse, or this is another way of saying that this concern about the downside, this over concern, is our expression in economics, mathematical expression for risk aversion. And it leads us to want to diversify our portfolio, not put everything in. So I was, just talking about upside investing, where I had, good chunk of your money safely invested, and then some money in the stock market. That's diversification. It's not all in the stock market, right? If you're willing to have downside living standard risk, you might say, okay, I'm willing to spend. I had a 10% return. I'm willing to increase my spending, and I'm willing to take the risk of having my living standard drop. If you're not that risk averse, then that's okay for you. You'll be able to sleep at night. Because you don't care that much about you can be happy at a much lower living standard, and it's not going to bother you. You spend your, early days on the beach as a beach bum, beachcomber or whatever, sleeping on the beach in a whatever knapsack bag, and that's so. Everybody has their own preferences here, but we have to think things out in advance. That's the essence of going beyond retirement. Not just being retired and, as you said, sitting and watching Netflix all day, because you're going to run out of good shows to see.
Yep.
They can't make them fast enough.
So the whole thing is just learning how, or paying attention enough to the choices that you're making, so that you can make the choices that average out and give you the lifestyle you want.
Think about think about everything as a choice, and every choice has a price.
Yeah.
So how can I, and I've got to look around. I mean, when we moved here to this terrific house at 1/3 the square footage cost, what I realized is that I had not done my homework as personal homework. In looking around at the housing market, I had thought in my mind, it can't be that cheap in Providence, so why bother looking? We're only an hour from Boston to drive. I can take the commuter rail, which I'm going to do when I teach in the spring. In January, I start teaching again. So I wasn't looking at the price. I was shopping blind, in the sense that we're staying in our apartment, not understanding what other things were costing.
Right.
The other opportunities were. I have a friend who lives in Bali who works from Bali, and things are very cheap, and he has people cooking him meals every day in Bali, Indonesia. He lives right on the beach, and so he likes that lifestyle. And so there's lots of opportunities out there just on the housing side, but how are you going to spend your time? Maybe you're volunteering to work for a museum, but maybe there's another 5 volunteer opportunities out there which might be more fulfilling if you really looked around.
Right. So it's just a matter of making the choices and knowing what the price of that choice is.
We kind of like, we get satisfied too. We think, we have a natural tendency, I think, as humans, to think that what we're doing is optimal. What I'm trying to get across is maybe what we're doing is suboptimal as just a natural state, because it has to be suboptimal because understanding all the prices of things requires a lot of looking, right? I mean, and so even though I've looked here in Providence and we've moved here and we spent 8 years living too expensively in Boston. We made a big mistake living that long in Boston in retrospect. I thought it was a brilliant move to come here. I started bragging to my friends, gee, how smart was my wife to find this place and how stupid was I? But then I agreed with her and we moved here and we made this minor killing on housing. And weren't we, cool for doing that? And then it occurred to me that what I was really doing was confessing being stupid, having lived in Boston and having not looked for 8 years.
Yep.
And I stopped bragging. I quickly realized that what I really needed to say was had been dumb, had made a mistake, and not looked beyond Boston. So it's not just beyond retirement; it's beyond your current abode. It's beyond your, you're going here for a vacation, or you have a vacation home that you go to every summer, but maybe you could rent it out and be going over here on a trip that you've never been to.
Yeah.
And you're kind of stuck in a rut because you haven't thought through this. That's the book is trying to get people to look at things from an economist angle, but also to shake them up. It's full of financial shockers. I told you about upside investing. That in some ways is a shocker to say that I can have a living standard floor and still invest in the stock market and never risk my living standard going down. That should be a shocker to people because it's not in any other, I've never seen it discussed except maybe one of my colleagues, Zvi Bodhi, in a couple of books he's written. But I think the two of us are the only ones who really been talking about this. Or the idea that, here's another thing. I mean, if you're older, as you get older in retirement, should you put more money in the stock market? And economics actually says you should. You should put a bigger share of your risky assets. Let's say you've got risky assets and you've got safe assets, okay? So the risky assets correspond to, let's say, risky bonds and risky stocks. And the stocks are riskier than the bonds. As you age, should your share of assets that you're putting into stock go up? Now, almost every financial planner in Canada and the US will tell you no. As you get older, you want to be more and more conservative in your portfolio. But economics says the opposite, actually. That's one of the financial shockers in this book. It says, gee, as you age, you're running down your liquid assets. You're spending those assets. So, but your pension, your state Canadian, your old age income, right? OAI pension, right?
OAS,
and,
but yeah.
OAS. And in the US, our Social Security benefit, that's staying fixed. It's adjusted for inflation. It's a floor. But our financial assets are running down. We're running those down because we're spending them up. So our overall portfolio, if we consider our pension from the state government, we're becoming more like a bond and less like a stock. There's a terrific economist named Moshe Milevsky at the University, I think it's University of Toronto. I believe he's there. Anyway, he's a terrific Canadian economist. And he wrote a book called Are You a Stock or a Bond? And I write about his book in my book, Money Magic. And Milevsky is pointing out something that Bob Merton, who's a Nobel laureate in finance and probably basically the Isaac Newton of finance, really done the most important work, including working out option pricing. He got the Nobel Prize for his work on that with a couple other economists. But anyway, Merton's point was that Moishe talks about and I talk about is that through time, as you age, you want to basically have an even share of your risky assets in bonds versus stock. But as you get older, you become more like a bond because more of your total resources are in this state pension because you're running down your other assets. So that's why a bigger share of those smaller absolute amounts of assets that are
could be
invested in stock should go into stock.
Right.
So that you can keep this ratio of stocks to bonds at a kind of an even level. And that's something very surprising that most people wouldn't think, but it makes sense. I mean, if you're, drive this home a little bit clearer. Suppose you had a $30,000 a year pension and $10 in assets. Well, if you invested all those assets in the riskiest possible security, which had a huge upside, but lots of risk, a very good probability of losing it all, there'd be no risk associated with that, right? All you could do is basically get a bonanza, win the lottery. It's like a lottery ticket, but there's no downside risk. You're always going to get your $30,000 a year. You're not putting your living standard at risk. But suppose you had $30 million and a $30,000 pension, and you put all of that $30 million in the stock market, and the stock market drops in half like it did in the Great Recession, or did in the dot-com bubble, or drops 86% like it did in the Great Depression from 29 through 33. Well, now you're putting your living standard, your future living standard, in your kids, because you're going to leave some of that money, your kids' living standard, your grandkids' living standard at risk. And so what economics is saying is that the rich need to invest more cautiously than the poor. Just think about that. That's exactly the opposite of what standard
everybody does.
Conventional wisdom is, right?
Yeah.
That's another financial shocker. So the book is it is an eye-opener, I think, in that respect. I shouldn't probably be kind of bragging on my book because that's probably not appropriate, but I'm enthused about economics. I'm enthused about trying to convey it. You asked at the beginning why I got into economics is try and help people. This is my way of helping people in a very practical way. Show them that economics is telling you things that are different than you're hearing from people that are trying to make money off of you.
And I think that's a big difference between the financial advisors, financial planners, and an economist. And that's something that I think everybody needs to understand, because it's not something that I really thought about before. I'm not really sure I thought about what an economist does, but I assume that all the financial people are all telling me the same thing. And you're showing me that that's not true at all.
Yeah, we have in economics, we have, finance as a branch of economics, and every top business school in the country has a finance department. And and there's a lot of people doing finance in economics departments, because all the Nobel Prizes in finance were awarded to a PhD economist, like Bob Merton's an economist, PhD economist. So it's basically just a subfield of economics. And there's not a single one of these programs that spends 10 minutes teaching the conventional method of personal finance. What people are taught in, like the Certificate of Financial Planning, the CFP programs, or the RIA, or Registered Investment Advisor programs, we're not teaching the same things that they're teaching, and they're not teaching what we're teaching. They're not spending 10 minutes on the economics approach to financial planning. Complete disconnect, really. And then you got to ask, well, who's teaching the right stuff? We're teaching the right stuff. Trust me. What they're teaching is not something anybody would teach. What they're teaching in programs in finance, in the top 50 programs, they'd be fired the next day. They're teaching seriously incorrect things, and things that will get people into financial trouble. Like the stock market is safe in the long run. No evidence whatsoever. All the evidence is the opposite. You try and buy insurance against the stock market dropping below a certain level. The further out you buy that insurance, you say, I'd like to buy it for being below this level 20 years out or 30 years out. The further out you go, the more expensive is the insurance. If the stock market was safer in the long run, it would be cheaper, but it's not. So,
unfortunately, we've run out of time for today.
Well, this is going
I know you could go on and tell us all sorts of stories out of your book and all kinds of other shocking things that I think people will be interested in. So I'm going to suggest that everybody should go out and buy Money Magic, because I think it's going to help all of us in planning for our retirement. I'd like to thank you very much for joining me today and for explaining to me the difference between financial planning and economics, and for suggesting to me and to the listeners the proper way to look at our decisions about planning for retirement. I think we've got a lot of things to think about.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to meet you and talk to your listeners, your viewers.
Really enjoyed it. Thanks.
My pleasure. Thank you. Take care.
And that's it for this episode of Beyond Retirement. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I hope you enjoyed it. Are you ready to start rocking your retirement? Head on over to www.beyondretirement.ca/rocking it and sign up to plan out your own roadmap for retirement. Don't wait till it's too late.